Well, hello and welcome to our cohort interview with Glyn Dewis. Glyn, I am thrilled to have you back on after, I'm not even going to admit how long it's been since we've been together in a hangout room, but it might be 6 years since we last spoke in
Seriously?
person.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
I'd have to look
That is
back.
crazy.
A long time.
Mm.
So I just want to welcome you and thank you for wanting to participate in this interview. We're in unique times. We can't meet in person. We can't meet at workshops. We can't meet at get-togethers. So welcome, Glyn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the invite. It was a yes straight away as soon as I read it. So.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm so glad. What we're going to cover today is a bit of chat, interview style. It's relaxed. We don't have a formal method per se, but I am really interested in words like legacy. And I am really interested in the printed portrait. And since we last spoke, you've taken on an incredible project that we're going to get to in a minute. And it's the, what's that, the 30, what is, tell me what it is,
39 to 45 portraits. Some people thought that's because how many portraits I was taking, but it's obviously for the years of World War II, 39 to 45.
Yeah. That, and it's a very meaningful collection of work. And when I say legacy, as a portrait artist, I do portraits of nature and portraits of people. And I think that portraits of people build legacy and create memory. And the printed portrait is also exceptionally important to me. And so I do a lot of printing. When I do portrait sessions, a printed portrait comes with every session. You can't get away from it with me. I don't mind a digital product for certain things, but I believe the legacy is in the tangible portrait that we can pass down.
Totally with you.
Other things, I mean, most people know you. Sorry for interrupting. Most people know you.
No, you carry on. I was just saying I completely agree with you about the printing side of things, Ron.
Yeah. Most people met you through Photoshop, for being an expert at Photoshop, teaching Photoshop and Lightroom. And it's originally how I found you when I was trying to make complex selections. And I found some incredible videos that were probably way back in Photoshop 6 before CC on selections. And Photoshop has advanced since then, and it does so many things now, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Compared to what it did. Selection, you can just select subject now and boom, you have a subject. Gone are the old trace it with a pen days. It can.
I still think, though, I mean, we may cover this, but I still think we need the skills to do that, because as good as it is, and it is really good, there are those images that it just doesn't perform so well, and we have to resort back to doing stuff that maybe we would have done a few years ago, or maybe even coming up with some new ways of doing things. So I quite like the challenge of that as well.
I do too. It's kind of like knowing how cameras worked when film was in them, knowing a bit of the old school, really understanding the fundamentals of how something comes together. So understanding how to make excellent selections without all the automated tools is a great skill to have, because I agree with you, in spite of all the wonderful AI we have, it's just imperfect. It doesn't, I can hardly remember a time when I didn't have to modify a selection manually. Somehow. Yeah. So I'm going to jump right in now. I'm going to do a screen share of a couple of things just to let our audience know. They probably know you already, but I just want to direct them to your website and direct them to what you're up to now. And then I'm going to ask you to kind of spin off and talk about your 39 to 45 and anything else you want to talk about. So I'm going to handle the first screen share. And so on your website, I'm going to go over to Glyn Dewis Home. So please go to glyndewis.com. I'm glad it's so easy to get to. Just Glyn Dewis. He's easy to find on the internet. And go there, and right away you can see incredible portraits, of course, and not just the 39 to 45. And blog posts. You love to write, Glyn, and I know you do that a lot. Writing's not one of my strong skills. I'm okay live in person, not so much for writing. Then the 39 to 45, which I think we're going to focus a bit on, do go into his gallery to see more than just that. I'm just, when I see portraits that have connection, my heart sings. And Glyn, you have portraits that have connection. And it's not simply a matter of processing. It's the relationship the photographer has with the person coming in for the portrait, be they a father, a mother, a model, a mentor. You have a way to connect with your client. And that's clear when you look through your portraits.
And that's only happened, Ron, over the
store.
last. That's only happened over the last couple of years, Ron, as well. So, you know, if we can talk about that, that's something I'd love to share about that.
That's going to be the first thing we talk about then. So the last thing I want to share is on the website, go over to the store. Glyn has, over the years, created wonderful tutorials that are remarkably affordable, absolute gold when it comes to learning about post-processing and now about the portraits he creates. So definitely go there. Now, I'm going to come back from Screenshare, and I want to talk about connection, because one of the things I strive for as a portrait artist, both in nature and in person, is connection. I always say story trumps technique every time.
Yeah.
You can have a remarkably poorly processed image, but if the connection is there, that's what's going to grab you. How do you feel about that connection? And what did you see? What was that shift that started getting you that connection?
If I'm honest, it was the project, the 39 to 45 project. That is what changed my photography completely. Because before I did that, I would take pictures. I'd have, you know, fun with people and kind of relax them just by chatting, I guess. But my focus was more on the technical, if I'm honest. But when it came to the 39 to 45 project, because I was photographing people who weren't models, they're not professional models. They weren't people who maybe actually, they didn't even want to be photographed, but they did it because of the reason we're doing it. I had to kind of spend more time talking to them before we did the photo shoot to get to know each other, to get them comfortable. And what I didn't realize at the time was that was the golden nugget. That was the secret to getting people to be relaxed and look themselves in front of the camera. It's just taking the time. And I've really learned over the last couple of years from doing this, that when it comes to portrait photography, when I go and take a portrait, that's probably at most 20% of what I do. The vast majority of the time I spend talking. The vast majority of the time, my kit, the backdrop, the camera, everything is in the car. I don't even bring it into the house at all, or because we're all mainly photographing these people at their homes. So the majority of my time is spent talking about absolutely anything and everything, getting relaxed with each other. And then when I feel that it's the right time, then I'll go and do the photo shoot. And even the way I do it, Ron, has changed. You know, technology, which I kind of didn't really think was that important going back a couple of years ago, now has kind of made the camera become my assistant, which allows me to do this, to do the engaging, which is just absolutely key to me, for me to get the portraits that I do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And as a portrait photographer, I don't have 10, 20-minute portrait sessions. Unless I'm doing a corporate headshots. When I do portraits, I want to learn about the person and I have a conversation. And I always tell people, portraits start to happen when the camera disappears and we're just together. And you know that moment. I mean, there's a moment everybody's conscious and they're stiff and they're unnatural.
Yeah.
And then there's a moment as you begin to converse and they relax and begin to trust you, that the camera disappears, even though there is a camera. You see the moment it disappears, the eyes become alive and the stories that start to tell bring out that emotion.
Absolutely. So, when you look at the people that I'm photographing within this project, how could I possibly not want to sit and talk to them? Do you know what I mean? As the main thing about the whole process, I want to hear about these people. Do you know what I mean? What they did. And also it's one thing I've learned as well is it's not a case of asking them and talking about the war, because that's what most people do. If we think about it, there's 75 years worth of life since the war that's worth talking about. Do you know what I mean? So we talk about all sorts of stuff. And by having a genuine interest, and that's the key word, a genuine interest in that person, you just get on. Do you know what I mean? You start to relax. You have a bit of fun. There's a bit of humor. When I then feel that we're getting on is when I'll then say, if I was photographing Paul, for example, you know, I'd say to Paul, listen, I'm here to take your picture. Let's go and get the stuff from the car. We'll get that done. Take us 10 minutes. We can then put it away and then carry on this conversation and have another cup of tea or whatever. It's just, play it down so much.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Because it isn't the be all and end all. Because if I'm focused on the technicals and getting what I want, when I get the picture, yes, it might be technically good, you know, the lighting and what have in the pose. But when a person who knows the person I've photographed looks at the portrait, are they going to go, oh, that is so them? You've really captured them. And that, I think, really is the ultimate compliment when you take a portrait. When you can show that picture in a print to somebody who knows them and they go, that is so them. Oh, that's lovely. That's what you want. And I would never get that if I didn't spend most of my time talking.
Yeah, that reminds me. I always say that reminds me of a story, and I know the interview is not about me and my experience, but I relate, and so I'll just relate a quick story. I took a photograph. I did a Characters of Main Street series, and I was photographing people I met at this cafe over the many years that I go there. You call it my morning office, and I've met all the characters of Newmarket on Main Street. Mm-hmm. And so our lifelong politician and former mayor, Tom Taylor, I wanted to photograph him. He left a great legacy. And during his session, I really had to wear him down. We were in the session, and it took about an hour, maybe over an hour. He was starting to get tired of me before he let his politician down and his person out. And I remember just about the last image I took was the image I chose, converted to black and white. And I said, now, Tom, I'm taking pictures with light that's not going to flatter your age, but it's going to reveal your character. And he said, fine. And so he never saw the picture I put up in the gallery at the cafe until I revealed it. And I revealed it, and I remember he walked in. I was really nervous. He walked in and he looked at it. And he just went, and he walked past. And then his granddaughter walked in, and she looked at it. She stopped dead. It was the first one she saw. There was 10 of them, and she saw that, and she walked up to it. She looked at it. She paused. She said, wow. You know, my heart just jumped a little. Yeah. And then his wife walked in, and she did the same thing that the granddaughter did. She stopped. She said, wow, and moved on. That's all I heard. And I knew that they saw the man, Tom, not the politician, Tom. Yeah. I just wanted to share that story.
No, that's actually interesting what you say there. The way you said about the light isn't going to flatter him, if you like, but it's going to show his character. That here we go. This kind of reminds me of something that I've been asked about a lot, and how I explain it during the photo shoot is that sometimes people say to me, do you ever show the portraits as you're taking them? You know, obviously, because pretty much all the time I shoot tethered to a laptop, so I can see everything nice and big. And people say, do you ever show the people? And I say, absolutely, I do. It's like, oh, I could never do that. I think what the key is when you show them, it's you take the while you're showing them, you change it, you turn it around so they don't feel so conscious. So again, going back to Paul, if I've got my laptop, I will show him straight away. I go, Paul, and I'll turn it to him. But what I won't do is go, Paul, you look amazing. Oh my God, you look fantastic. Because he might not like having his picture taken, and he's going to go, oh no, I don't like having my picture taken. But what I do though, I turn it and I go, Paul, I am loving the light on this. I'm really happy with how the lighting's looking on this. Oh yes, I'm really happy. So I'm not kind of saying that I'm really happy with how Paul looks. I'm saying I'm happy with how the actual lighting is, which he then doesn't. He then like, oh, all right, okay. Do you know? And it just completely changes everything. So you know, I guess it's not tricks, but it's kind of, I guess it's people skills, isn't it? In a way, really, what's going to make somebody feel more comfortable than not. So.
And it is, I know in a portrait session, you can see when I light up when I've got the light right. Like I'm kind of saying, but look at the light on that. I can relate to that completely.
Yeah,
And
I
then
get
they light up.
overexcited when I've nailed it. It's like I've had a few too many coffees, because I
Yeah.
genuinely get overexcited when I'm really know we're getting it.
Yeah, we're peas in a pod. I know you mentioned I think you got a little bit of a screen share you might want to share from Lightroom just to show. Do you want to give that
Yeah,
a
yeah, I've
try and
got.
see?
Yeah, there's a few. If I just show you just a few, or host disabled it. If you just need to
No,
enable that,
it's
maybe.
enabled now. You go ahead. Yeah.
All right, cool. Here we go. Let's have a look. So all it was just to show. I know that you've shown a few of these ones already, but it's just to show some of the people that I photographed, and how, if anybody hasn't seen this project, within the group that we've got here, that I'm hoping that you would see there's like a uniformity across them, so that if you then, later on see a picture from this series that you don't see now, you might go, oh, that looks like an image from that series that Glyn had. But I mean,
Yeah.
these are
And
the
just
kind of
before
people here.
you, yeah,
Go on.
just before you carry on with that, that's a really great point, because a lot of us are doing some work in a new leveling guide on in series, or creating a cohesive body of work, which I think is really important, and what you've explained really well. So I just wanted to point that out to those watching in the community, that this is a cohesive body of work. And we do see Glyn in the images, even though they're portraits of others. Because when you have a portrait, inevitably there's always two people, the subject and the photographer, in a relationship. So yeah, sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, not at all. No, not at all. It was, in fact, it was Joel Grimes that gave me that advice years ago about doing a project and making sure that it's at least 20 images, so that over that time they become, you do the same thing over and over and over again, so that project does have that kind of uniformity, if you like. But the pictures here, I mean, these, I'll go through just a few of them. I can remember every single moment of every single photo shoot with these people. Just the most amazing people. The very sad thing about all this is the fact that we've lost so many of these people over the last 12 months. Now, admittedly, these men and women, there's a few women in here as well, they're all into their late 90s. The eldest one I photographed is 104. He's 104 a couple of days ago. Just incredible people. And it's just nature, isn't it? The way things are, when we get people that kind of age. However, it's been really sad that they've not been able to have the send off that they so rightfully should have had. Do you know what I mean? These people here. But I mean, I look at this guy here, Alan. Oh my Lord! When I remember kneeling down in front of him, and kind of like getting, because we actually did this photo shoot in a pub, great location for a photo shoot. So I'm kind of kneeling down in front of him, and we're just chatting away. And I said, "Oh, do you mind if I just move your medals around a little bit, get them nice and level? It's easier to do it now than later." And he said, "Yeah, no problem, no problem." And then I said, "Here, what's this badge on your arm here then?" And he said, "Oh, that's the pregnant prawn. It's a seahorse, but we used to call it the pregnant prawn. And it was given to the soldiers who were the first to land on the beach on D-Day." And I was like, wow. I was completely like, oh my God, I'm in front, I can't believe you were one of the first on the beaches. And then he said, and then he just took a throwaway comment. He says, "Oh yeah, they told us we had about 20 minutes to live." And he just said it like it was nothing. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. I said, how do you compute that? How do you mentally deal with that? A 20-year-old kid, which is what you were. How do you deal with that when someone tells you that, you could have 20 minutes to live now? And he says, "Well, we wanted to get on the beach." To be honest with you, we wanted to get, he says, because the sea was rough and everyone's being, sick and hot. It was awful. We wanted to get our feet on the ground. And I just couldn't believe that he was so matter of fact about it. It's just incredible. But I mean, all these people here, this guy here, Ron, this man, there's certain people I photographed that you remember more than others. And it's not because of who they are, but it's because of what they've been through and how it maybe changed or made me think about how to approach the photo shoot differently. Because again, I know I'll refer to this quite a lot, but this project has changed my photography, not just the results I get, but it's changed, it's changed me as a photographer, massively changed me as a photographer. Because before this project, I would approach a photo shoot, a portrait shoot. If I was going to photograph Paul, Vessa, Julie, you, whatever, I'd kind of have the same mindset when I was going to go and do the photo shoot. I do this, I do that, blah, blah. However, this guy here, John Sleep, who we sadly lost 3 days ago, 100 years of age, wonderful, wonderful man. But he'd suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder his entire life, ever since the war. whole life, in his late 90s, when his wife was still alive, he told me she would regularly say to him in the morning, "You were in the army again last night, John," because he used to wake up screaming and shouting. And to think he'd done that all of his life. Now,
Oh, yeah.
I mentioned already that me talking, getting to know these people before you do the photo shoot is massively important. Yes, it helps people to relax. But what I didn't see coming, one of the huge benefits I didn't see coming from this, was when you talk to people, you get to sort of, you get to understand that everybody's got different needs, and there's you got to approach things differently. My approach with John was very different to photographing the guys you've seen already, because of what John had been through and what he told me he'd been through. It made me think that if I use a flash that's going to go off, could that have an adverse reaction? Could it cause him to have some kind of a, I don't know,
Oh,
could it
yeah.
really affect him badly, you know? So with him, I did the photo shoot differently, and I had a video light in my car. I always carry a flash or a video light. So I used that instead. So I put the video light on, so there was no flash going to go off. I turned on the silent shutter so he didn't hear a click. And I also used a cable release so he didn't
Wow.
see my finger doing this. So he had no idea I was
Yeah.
taking his picture. And we just got, and I just kind of said to John, when he was sat there, the great thing about the video light, Ron, obviously, as you know, is what you see is what you get. You can see the
Yeah.
lighting. It's there in
You
front of
see it
you.
back of the camera. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just said to John, I said, "Tell me about your training, John, when you joined the parachute regiment. What did you do? What was your training like?" And he just went into it. "Oh, we did this, we did that." And he was living it. But as he's doing it, out of his view, I'm giving it that, taking the pictures. He had no idea until eventually he stops to draw a breath. And I go, "John, I am so happy with the lighting on these. These are really good."
Yeah.
And he's like, I didn't know you were
Oh,
doing that. He
yes.
says, "You crafty so-and-so." He says,
Mm.
"Ways and means, John." But I mean, it's just a
Oh,
perfect example for me that, you know, by putting the priority of talking and getting to know people, it not just relaxes them, it makes you learn a bit about them, and maybe think, I need to do something slightly different to normal here. Does that make sense?
oh, that's, oh my goodness, things you wouldn't normally consider. These are very unique individuals with each has a unique story and life experience. So
Yeah,
that was just brilliant to hear how that went, and your ability to photograph without actually photographing. New cameras today, they let us to do everything silently. We can do live view preview. We can control it from a remote. And then constant light. All
absolutely. Yeah.
beautiful
The
tips.
technology,
Yeah.
you know, if you're okay, we'll talk about how I use that now, because again, I never used to really, I just thought some of it was a bit gimmicky. And believe me, I love gadgets. I absolutely love gadgets. But that I didn't, there's certain things in the camera I just thought were there just to make it look better than the next camera. But I'll explain that in a moment. But let me just show you just a couple more of these people here, because this guy here, David Edwards, again, we lost him fairly recently. I became incredibly close to this man. What a wonderful, wonderful man. If you go to the project website, you'll see BBC News footage about him. I mean, he was so lovely. I remember when I drove back from photographing him, that his son Chris, who's become a very close friend, messaged me to say, "My dad's told me to tell you there's family here for you in Wales." I mean, it's just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But I mean, there's some people here, like you'll notice that when you go to the projects, the portraits, and you see them there, you'll notice that not everybody has had a close-up portrait done. And that's because it just didn't seem relevant at the time. It didn't seem, you know, I'll stop the share now, but it just didn't seem appropriate on some of the people I've photographed so far to take it that step further and do the close-up. You know what I mean? And again,
Yeah.
this is how this whole project has changed me. Whereas before I would approach a photo shoot thinking, right, by the end of this photo shoot, I will have a seating portrait, a close-up portrait, an interview, blah, 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 blah. I'll be happy then. Whereas my mindset now is, I'll get what's appropriate. So when I
Yes.
go and take the
Yeah.
photo, if I, you know, I'll get them, you know, we relax, we do the seated one. If I think I just don't want to push it, I want to leave everybody I photograph, especially these people, with a good taste in their mouth, so that when the time comes that maybe I want to revisit them, that they look forward to it, as opposed to, Oh, yeah, I remember that guy. He said he'd be here an hour. He was here 3 hours. Oh, no. I don't want that. I would rather leave before they almost want me to leave, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
all only possible because of us just having this conversation and getting to know each other.
Yeah. It's such a different experience between wanting to just take a photograph and wanting to build a relationship or to create a legacy. And this is that word I come back to. In almost all cases here in my studio, people are very excited when they leave. They didn't know the experience would be that enjoyable or fun, or that they would want to do it again. Because quite honestly, coming to a professional photographer to have a photograph taken is intimidating. And people do have a fear of it, just like a fear of speaking or a fear of being on stage. Being photographed carries with it apprehension. And so the more we can do as photographers to reduce that feeling that they have that they need to perform, the better that would be. I always tell people it's my job to take a wonderful photograph of you. It's not your job to try to do anything. We're just going to have a conversation. And then in the end, that becomes successful. Like I say, that moment that camera disappears. Speaking of technology, I love the stories, but I have to admit my mirrorless camera has really made a difference in shooting portraits. In technique, because my accurate focus rate has gone to over 90% with the eye tracking capabilities of cameras now.
It's just a gift. It really is.
It is. It is. I'm a Nikon shooter, but you can shoot Sony or Canon or whatever. They're all good now.
Yeah.
And then the ability, I have stopped shooting a lot with my eye to the viewfinder. I shoot a lot with the camera down. I actually got.
We are peas in a pod, Ron. We're peas in a pod.
It's so true. So then I can talk and look and talk and
totally.
it's so good.
Yeah.
Whereas,
and that's exactly how I do it. That is exactly how I do it, because yeah, exactly. Because what I was finding, and I'm guessing it's the same with you, which is why you've now changed, is that you would get somebody relaxed and get them kind of feeling where we can now do the photo shoot. But then the minute you did that, it kind of undid all the good that you did before. It's like, oh no, I'm gonna have a picture taken now. Whereas me, I always use a tripod. So my camera's on the tripod. The person I'm photographing will be in front of me. We're keeping the conversation going. I can look at the back of my screen. I'm shooting mirrorless as well. I can see you on the back there. I can see the focus is tracking your face. And obviously I know that the eye focus is going to kick in as well. So I'm always above it with my finger just resting, and we're just talking. And every now and again, if I was photographing you, Ron, I'd say, actually, Ron, do me a favor. Just look straight on the lens for me, just there. Just that's it. Just hold that for a second and click. Anyway, what were you saying again about that? It's so played down, but my camera is doing what I would have done before of going, oh, I'm just checking that. Yeah, just check. I can trust it now, 100%. I know it's going to nail it. So I can do what I do. The camera does what it should be doing. Happy days.
My best advice for growing photographers is invest in equipment when it solves a problem for you.
Yeah,
and this mirrorless technology has solved some huge issues for me. And I was slow to the gate too. I was diehard DSLR guy, being a wildlife photographer as well. There's still a place for the DSLR, but the mirrorless has come so far. I remember back, and I'm going to go back more years than I'm going to count, but when I was in my maybe 19, 20, 21, I'm trying to remember the age exactly. I worked for a department store portrait studio. And I remember they had this big camera with a big rollback on it. And it was on a compression tripod on wheels. And so we took portraits, but we didn't look through the viewfinder once we composed the shot and had all the grid lines in it. We looked over the lens. And that's how we shot back then. And we had our cable release in our hand. And I'm just thinking to what you're sharing about having a remote in your hand and looking over the camera. It seems I've come full circle.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've gone full
doing
circle
this once
there.
again.
Yeah.
So
it definitely works. Just keeping that engagement going, and it's also like, because you've got your studio set up there, so people will turn up. You've no doubt got it all ready, so to save having to kind of make them wait or whatever. But with me, I'm bringing it into, and I'm talking about these people here, but I bring it into their home. So I'm setting up.
Yeah.
It's minimal kit, minimal footprint. But again, when it comes to the keeping the conversation going, before, when I was so focused on the technicals, I would kind of clam up when I was setting up and I was thinking, right, do that, put that there. That needs to go about there. Whereas I've kind of practiced it over and over and over again now. So I just, as I'm setting up, keep the conversation going, because if I've noticed that if I leave any time that I go quiet, that person who doesn't really feel comfortable being photographed, they're then going to fill their head with all the thoughts of being photographed again because I've gone quiet.
Exactly.
So just keep the conversation going. Yeah.
So I've seen some of what you use. I love a big Octabox one light setup with a reflector. There's nothing more beautiful than the light you can get, except for a great window light. Many of the people in my group, or quite a few of them, have actually been to my studio, and they see that I work with a combination between window light and using the big Octaboxes. And I just love the quality of a one light setup for revealing character in portraits. Yeah,
totally. That's
and
definitely my thing. Again, that for me was something that I did. Again, going back to, because I don't know about you, Ron, but everybody wants to be a photographer, which is great because it's so much more accessible these days. But when it comes to, getting your own style, that's really what we strive for, isn't it? So I know that I kind of started out using one light, and everybody was using one light, so I went to two lights. Then I noticed people are using two lights, so I went to three lights, and it goes on. But where do you draw the line? So I kind of thought, right, do you know what? I'm going to strip it back, do one light, and I'm just going to do my thing with that. Because really, what does my style come from? It's not just the lighting. It's also, like, thankfully, which is really kind of, you mentioned already, Bear, you can tell there's that engagement with the subject. So it's a combination. It's the lighting, it's the engagement, it's the post-production. It's not about how many lights and stuff that I can have on it at all. So I stripped everything back. I mean, one of my favorite photographers, Annie Leibovitz, predominantly a one light shooter, unless she's doing a big, elaborate setup for a Vanity shoot, Fair or whatever. But predominantly one light shooter. And look, she's been doing that for years. Does it mean all her work looks the same? Absolutely not. It's beautiful work. It's Annie Leibovitz, but it certainly doesn't look the same. So if it's good enough for Annie Leibovitz, it's damn well good enough for me.
I know one of her lighting guys, a photographer, Felix Kuhns, teaches a one light setup that he developed while working with her. So as we kind of wind down the interview portion, is there anything specific you'd like to share with my audience? I mean, I love that you've shared about legacy, that you're doing important work, you're capturing character, that while you love gear, simplicity is important. I mean, all these points are really good. Is there any kind of parting wisdom you want to pass on about the work you're doing, or any new projects coming up?
Do you know what the first thing that comes to mind, Ron, to say is that I did a video recently for my YouTube channel, which was all to do with, I actually called it keeping creative during COVID. And it was all to do with how creativity is like a muscle that we need to constantly exercise, or otherwise it loses strength and what have you. So my only parting comment for this part would be to say that during these times, if you are a portrait photographer and you're not able to get out and take portraits because of restrictions and what have you, get out and photograph anything. Just keep the tools in your hands. I mean, I'm doing a landscape project now, which I thought was something to just enjoy, take my mind off. But my Lord, it's completely gripped me. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's just really, I'm seeing photography on a different scale when it comes to that. But just to get out and do anything and everything, sort of get out in the forest, photograph some woodland and anything. Just keep the tools in your hands so that when we can get back to some kind of normality, we're not having to kickstart things again. If we keep creative, keep trying to keep the grey matter going, when we can get back to normal, we're going to hit the ground running, and we'll be better for it. Don't be one of these people that says, I can't wait for the pandemic to disappear so I can start taking pictures again. Get out and take pictures. They might not be what you normally do, but take them anyway. So
Yeah,
that's the kind of thing that I
that's
would say.
wonderful advice. And I know there's a few people in the room today with us and will be watching that have taken it upon themselves to do that, to get out every day and get pictures and get creative or shoot out their window or just try to see the world in a new and different way, besides what they would normally have been doing. And that's really important. I say probably one of my mantras is that creative is not how you feel, it's who you are. And so even if you don't feel it, when you go out and you engage with your camera, your tool of creativity, you will produce creative results because you can't help it. That's who you are, not just how you feel. So yeah, I can completely
know
relate. We are
that,
two peas in a pod.
We definitely are. And I know that in fact, it was somebody else. Sorry if I'm going on here, but somebody else observed this because I started doing this landscape thing, which, you know, admittedly, I'm not very good at landscapes because I've never really done them. So it's a learning thing. And I'm kind of sharing I'm sharing everything, warts and all, the good, the bad, and the ugly about my landscape photography as I learn this new craft. And I ended up taking a portrait. It's weird that I say portrait, but I ended up taking a portrait of a tree. Now that kind of happened when I went to the forest to go and take what I thought was a landscape. It didn't happen. So I pulled off to the side under the tree canopy, put my bag down, had a coffee and just relaxed. I just had this coffee, just looking around, taking it all in, listening to the birds, hearing the wind going through the trees. It was magical. And then I saw this tree as this sunlight came through and hit the green lichen on it. It was just glorious. Took a picture of it and I was over the moon. And there was this guy that shared, I posted this, and this guy shared the comment. In fact, he emailed me directly. And he said that, I'll paraphrase what he said, but basically he said, you don't suck at landscape photography. He said, look what you've done with the tree. The reason you got that picture of the tree is because you approached it the same way you approach people portraits.
Yeah.
You slowed down, you got to know the place, you relaxed, you took your time, and eventually then you did your picture. I thought, wow, that is a real overlap there between the two. Do you know what I mean? So I'm 100% convinced that what I'm doing with this landscape stuff, how that's changing me, because it's slowing me down even more. I'm convinced that's going to have a positive impact on my portrait work. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that changes things as well.
Yeah. Oh, you're speaking my language. I say I capture. Yeah. Well, portraits of people and portraits of nature. And I love to reveal beauty and character in the people I meet and the places I travel to. So that sounds exactly along the lines of what you're experiencing yourself. Well, Glyn, thank you so much for having this interview. We're going to move off to a Q&A for the group, but I really, truly appreciate getting together and chatting. When the world opens up and there's going to be a way we have to get together in person.
Totally.
Have a coffee together. Yeah.
That would be great, but not at 3
in
a.m. like Paul mentioned earlier on.
No. Well, that was the outcome of other things. But yeah, we do meetups and they just end up staying up way too late.
This face needs its beauty sleep, Ron. So
anyway, thank you again, Glyn. I really appreciate it. Hang on with me. I'm just going to stop the recording now. We're going to move into our Q&A period. Actually, I'm just going to do a bit of a pause, but thanks. And I'll see you on the next interview.